Moving on, the inquest into anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Timol continues in the High Court in Pretoria. Today, pathology and trajectory experts testified, bringing more evidence to light. Yesterday's evidence that Timol suffered injuries prior to his alleged suicide fall was supported in court today by testimony from Dr. Shakira Holland, who also pointed out that the bruises on Timol's body was irregular for a fall from that height. Various testimonies have now been heard not supporting police officers' claims that Timol committed suicide after he fell from the 10th floor of John Foster Square Police Station in Johannesburg. Former Minister in the Presidency and SACP stalwart Eso Pahad testified that the late political activist Ahmed Timol would never have committed suicide. Pahad said Timol was Muslim and Islam prohibited suicide. Ahmed Timol died in police custody on the 27th of October, 1971.
So the post-mortem findings indicate that all the wounds on the body were ante-mortem. In other words, they were all sustained before death. There are a number of wounds that could not be attributed to a fall from a height. So there are the following multiple external wounds which showed scab formation, indicating that the wounds were present before the fatal fall and were not caused by the fall. So once you have scab formation, my lord, it shows that the wound is in the process of healing, and therefore it cannot be that those wounds were occurred, that those wounds were incurred during the fall from a height.
Well, let's go live now to the North Gauteng High Court for the latest details with regards to the Ahmed Timol inquest.
Thank you, Lord. I do have some questions. Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, you have obviously studied the photographs, the post-mortem reports, and other statements by possible witnesses. Is it correct?
My lord, that is correct. I must say, the only statements from other witnesses that I have are the statement that was made by Dr. Esop during this particular inquest. And then from the original inquest, I've got the statements from Daisel and Rodriguez.
Did you, in compiling your report and considering the injuries, did you also take note of the evidence that was presented in the inquest by the various experts?
My lord, I didn't have access to any of the information or anything from the previous inquest before the report was compiled. So when I compiled the report, the only information that I had access to was the original post-mortem report done by Dr. Skeppers and the post-mortem photographs.
I just see from the report, from the evidence rather, in the post-mortem that Dr. Gluckman appeared in the post-mortem on instructions of the family and obviously the lawyers acting on behalf of Mr. Timol. And he attended to the actual post-mortem with Dr. Skeppers. Is that correct?
I don't have access to those records, my lord.
Right. Yes, my lord, this is the record of the inquest. I believe that is Annexure A, and to what I'm referring to is paginated on the record page 784. I don't have a pagination, a separate pagination as the other than the record, the original record's pagination. On page 784. It is indicated that, and that was the evidence of Dr. Gluckman. He says here, and that is the second paragraph, that on the 29th of October 1971, on the instructions received from the attorney acting for Mr. and Mrs. Timol, I attended the post-mortem examination carried out by Dr. N.J. Skeppers on the body of the person which I understand to be that of Mr. Ahmed Timol. Right. Now, what I wish to put to you is that both Dr. Skeppers and Dr. Gluckman were in fact in the best possible position to consider the injuries of the deceased, Mr. Timol.
That's correct, my lord.
Now, the photographs which you considered are of a rather poor quality. It is like a faded black and white, if I can describe it as that. And that is in the exhibit C7.
That's correct, my lord.
Now, both Dr. Skeepers and Dr. Gluckman testified, as well as Professor Koch testified during the inquest extensively in relation to the injuries and their interpretation of the injuries. And all of them were also cross-examined by both the lawyers acting on behalf of Mr. Meisels and Mr. Diesels acting on behalf of the family. I put that to you. I know that you have not read the finding. Now, is it your opinion that they were wrong in their findings, that Dr. Skeepers, let's deal with Dr. Skeepers in his report, in his post-mortem report, where he did not identify any serious injuries. There were cuts and bruises that he said that had scab formation, but there's no injuries or serious injuries that he identified which was inconsistent with a fall of that height.
My lord, as it's been stated, I don't have access to the testimony that was given by any of the pathologists at the time of the inquest. And essentially what happens is that the post-mortem report is a detailed documentation by the pathologist of the wounds that were received or the wounds that were identified at the post-mortem examination. And the post-mortem report won't contain opinions of the forensic pathologists about the causation or any of the effects of the wounds. So it is simply a document stating the post-mortem findings at the time of the post-mortem examination. So it does not in general include an opinion, and in this particular case it did not include any opinions.
But the evidence did. And the evidence is captured in the record from page 664 up to page, if I can exclude the argument, it is up to page 1069. In other words, for more than 400 pages of evidence by these experts that testified and were cross-examined and were examined in relation to these injuries. And apart from the injuries with scabs and the injuries that were described as possible fresh injuries, apart from the causing the death of the deceased, or that is in relation to the fall, there is no indication that I could find, and I'm sure my learned colleagues will correct me if I'm wrong, there's no indication in this evidence that there were any serious injuries that were inconsistent with a fall that was found on Mr. Timol's body.
So, my lord, essentially, from my report, I've not changed or elaborated on anything. I've just taken the injuries that were documented, and I've interpreted them according to my experience and years of training. And as it is clearly stated, is that from what we see, there is a certain pattern of injuries that we see commonly that occurs as a fall from a height. So based on the fact that there were some injuries that fit the pattern and there were some injuries that did not fit the pattern, that is how I came to my conclusion. So I can't speak to the training or the expertise or the research that the original pathologist had done at the time of the inquest.
But do you agree that they were in a better position than yourself to evaluate, specifically Dr. Skeepers and Dr. Gluckman were specifically in a better position to assess the injuries and to make a finding in relation to the injuries in relation to the fall?
So, my lord, I do agree that they were in a better position to identify the injuries that were found on the deceased. So as I stated, those were the injuries that were documented in the post-mortem report. As to the fact that were they in a better position to interpret the injuries, that I don't agree with.
Yes, and just to further indicate to you that throughout this inquest, the learned magistrate was assessed by Dr. Simmons, if I'm not mistaken, yes, who was also an expert who assisted him. And these issues with regard to the injuries were
Forensic pathologist Shakira Holland currently testifying in the Ahmed Timol inquest. Questions being asked around his injuries and those post-mortem results. Holland stating that the pattern of injuries from a fall of height, and that there's a pattern with regards to that, and some of the injuries on Ahmed Timol's body fit those patterns, but others did not. Also speaking around the photo quality of those post-mortem pictures, stating that they were of a poor quality. But stay tuned to NN7. We are going to continue to dip into these proceedings to keep our viewers up to date with the latest details. And